Welcome to this new episode of The Disabled Life. The purpose of this podcast is to tell people how I live my life. The name I'm using on the podcast now is The Disabled Guy, because I felt that you needed to hear something as opposed to just my voice there. I'm a disabled male living in Florida with cerebral palsy. I'm here to tell you how I live my life and some of the volunteer work that I do and how I managed to do it with cerebral palsy. Without further ado, let's go into the episode. What I'm going to talk about today is something that I've been through, because let me explain what's happening here. Okay, I am of Latin descent. My mom is from Costa Rica, my dad's from Cuba. But the reason I'm making this podcast and starting it out this way is because I want to talk about cultures and words and meanings of words. Okay. What I mean by that is there's words in the English language that are bad words, like F you, for example. That's a bad word. Nobody uses that word, or the B word. Nobody uses those words. If they do, it's because they're upset, and I respect that. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is not that. In Costa Rica, we use a word that means "don't bother me." I'm going to translate it. No joda. That's just the word that means "don't bother me." But in Cuba, where my dad's from, that's a bad word because it's got a sexual connotation. But what I'm saying to you is, since my mom is from Cuba and since my dad's from Cuba, mom's from Costa Rica. In Costa Rica, that's the same word, "don't bother me." So I don't use such a word, even though I don't feel that word is a negative word or bad word. I just don't use it out of respect. But what makes it difficult is when we used to go to Costa Rica, and when I was a teenager, people would use it. I would have to remember, don't use that word, because that word to my dad is a bad word. And people would wonder why you don't use that, why you would use a different word. So what I'm saying, it's difficult. It's difficult when you're Spanish but you're multicultural. It's weird. It's different. And let me say something else. Let me talk about some more things. My mom has a friend that's from Colombia. I'm not gonna use names because I can't use names because I didn't ask for permission to use names, and that's my policy. I don't use names, and I don't know when people when I don't talk to them. I don't use names. So, or when they don't give me permission. So, there's a fruit. I don't know what it's called in English, but I'll use the English word, the Spanish word. Sorry, it's called papaya, and it is a fruit. And the person from Colombia spoke to a Cuban person. Hey, give me the papaya, and he got freaked out because in his part of Cuba, that's a bad word. That's got a sexual connotation to that word. It's difficult. So sometimes as people, we have to think how and what we say. So it's, one thing I'm going to say now is that I understand why the words are like that. It's funny because my mom and I use the word amongst us. We use the words, that word. And because to me, it means don't bother me. It doesn't mean the bad way. To me, it does not. To me, it doesn't have a sexual thing. But anyway, that's what I'm going to tell you. It's difficult when you're a teenager or a young adult and you're listening to people say use this word. You're like, why? And it's another thing that was difficult. When we used to go with my dad, their mom or dad used to say, don't say that in front of him because it's a bad word. thinks it's a bad word, and it's just culture. That's something that I don't disagree with it, because I can't. If that's what it means, and then their culture, that's fine. I have no objection to that. Because that's what it means. That's what it means. Another country means something else, and I understand it, and I respect both countries. In I believe it's in what is this place called? Brazil. The OK symbol is a bad word. It means a bad word. I believe it means what the middle finger means here in the United States. That's what I'm just going to use that as an example, because that's cultural. That's different. That's something that we as people have to learn. And even though we may not agree, or we may not feel that that's a bad word, we have to learn not to use them. But that happens when you are multicultural. Meaning that my mom's from Costa Rica, my dad's from Cuba. If they were both from Cuba, it would not be as difficult, because I would just not use it, because it's not a bad word to me. So, and as adults, we sometimes make decisions on how we want to talk about things, but also understand, just because we're adults doesn't mean we're going to sit here and we're going to disrespect our parents. We are not doing that. At least I am not going to do that. To me, that's wrong. It's fine. I may not agree with what they say, but I won't go against it. I'll just follow it along, because that's how it is. And that's just me. I'm a very respectful person when it comes to that, because that's, to me, is important. I decided to do this episode at the beginning of the year. Let me say Happy New Year for those of you that celebrate New Year's. And this one's going to come out on the 3rd of January at 10 p.m. when it normally does. I had taken a break for a couple more breaks, because you do need a mental break, and you do need time even if you're thinking about podcasting. It's nice not to have to sit here behind the recorders and microphone, the headsets, and have to sit there and isolate yourself, even though it might be for a few minutes a day. But I don't know how. One thing that I say is, it's hard enough to do 2 episodes a week. Some people do weekly episodes or daily episodes I've seen, and that's difficult. That's something that I would not do, and I would not make myself do, because sometimes it's hard. Sometimes I've had to program. I've had to come home and sit down after going out and doing some things. I had to come home and sit down and do an episode. Well, that's a commitment there. But I'm not gonna say it is not easy to sit down and do 2 or 3 episodes. I can handle. I can handle, and that because that's what I decided to do, and I know I can handle it. But more than 2, I don't think I can do. I don't think I want to do that, because it's a commitment. I do have a commitment to you guys and girls that listen to me, and I know people listen to me from other countries. It is something that I really value, and thank you. In closing, let me say thank you for listening to this episode of The Disabled Life. You can follow me on the following platforms. You can follow me at Good Pods. You can leave comments, messages there. You can also follow me on Twitter at The Disabled Guy. And you can also listen to me on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and many others. Once again, thank you for listening, and I'll also give you my email. My email is Kilo Echo 4 Kilo Echo Yankee, or KE4KEY@gmail.com. Once again, thank you. And thank you for your support. And I'll see you next week. Yes. And also, I would appreciate if you would give me a rating either on Spotify or Apple Podcast, and also you can also leave a written message on Apple Podcast. But that the only drawback to that is that you're doing only one message is allowed per podcast. Sorry, not per podcast, per person. And it cannot be a person that has already left a message. It has to be somebody that has left a new person that's leaving a message. With that, thank you.